Here's a part 2 to yesterday's video. In this video, we'll look into the actual S7 Act and define the sections I was talking about and explain how it applies to recreational prospecting. I received some backlash, but it's understandable as this is a tough pill to swallow, so I bear no ill will to those who did so, and it just means I didn't explain the Act well enough, so that's my bad. This video will fully clarify what I was saying and we will look into what was written by the government themselves to dispel any confusion. And confusion is rife in this state. There are so many laws, so many different classifications, some exemptions, though very little, exist that render classifications moot, and in general it's just a minefield to navigate. So it's not at all surprising to me that many people are ripping their hair out over it, much like I was when I first got into this. Now for some background, I lived in Ballarat for a number of years, and I'm very familiar with what the land looked like in terms of Crown land available to prospect in. If I wasn't, that blue box of hell that I was describing in the last video wouldn't have really stood out to me the way that it did. It's a very recent introduction to this area. Aside from the Act, there's also what's written on the fossicking website at resources.vig.gov. This is our first clue. This website was written to attempt to provide an easier way to understand a convoluted and insanely confusing Act. You'll see what I mean in a moment when I go through the Act itself. But if you scroll down to the bottom of the Vic Resources government website, under the list of prohibited Crown land, this is what is written. Prohibited Crown land is land where recreational prospecting is banned, and includes land that is, and the line referring to S7 is an area exempted from recreational prospecting or an extractive industry or otherwise exempted under the Mineral Resources Sustainable Development Act 1990 or any other act. Now for the Act itself. The Act itself is 410 pages long, but I'll skip to what applies to recreational prospecting. To start, here's the section that forbids it. Scroll down to page 157. Under Part 5, Division 1 on page 157, regarding recreational prospecting under a miner's right, it is explicitly stated that such rights do not apply to land exempted under Section 6, 6A, and 7, unless specifically included. And as you will see shortly, S7 is listed in Section 6. It's important to note this little term here. Miners' rights fall under other authorities. Keep this in your mind as we will come back to it, and the term authorities will be very important in understanding the restrictions shortly. The section states the following. A miner's right entitles the holder to search for minerals on any of the following land unless the land is covered by a mining license, prospecting license or retention license. This is private land but only with the consent of the owner or occupier, and Crown land other than land exempted under Section 6, 6A or 7 of this Act or nominated under Section 7.1 of the Crown Land Reserves Act of 1978. This means that S7 land is off limits for recreational prospecting unless the Minister grants explicit written permission. Now it's important to note that because both the miners' rights and tourism fossicking section includes the statement other than land exempted under Section 6, 6A or 7, it means anything written in these sections applies to this because that connection has been explicitly made here in writing. If it wasn't written, the two would not be tied together. But since it is, we now head to Section 6. You can find that at the bottom of page 25. Section 6 is land not available for exploration, mining and searching. Again, because the connection in the miners' rights section and tourism fossicking section, which is on page 157 and 159 respectively, links back to Section 6, this means that this activity is included in this statement. So this refers to land not available for any prospecting activities, whether it's small scale or a huge mining company. This is land that is unavailable to be touched by any prospecting or mining activity. Now you might get confused by this bit here, understandably. The following land is exempted from being subject to a license or other authority under this Act. Here is the other authority bit that I was talking about. The phrase exempted from being subject to a license or other authority means that certain lands are completely off limits for any kind of mining, prospecting or fossicking. Whether it's a large-scale mining operation or small-scale recreational prospecting with a panel detector. Because fossicking under a miner's right and tourism fossicking right is listed as other authorities in this Act, some might mistakenly think that this only applies to licensed activities. But the law specifically prohibits recreational prospecting on exempted lands as well because it mentions or other authority. This is confirmed in the Miners' Rights section, Part 5, Division 1, which explicitly states that fossicking cannot occur on land exempted under Section 6, 6A or 7, even if you hold a fossicking authority. Additionally, Section 6 defines exempted lands as being not available for a license or other authority. Again, the term other authority includes recreational permissions like a miner's right or tourist fossicking authority because they are listed under the section of other authorities in this Act. Together, these sections make it clear that the prohibition applies broadly, not just to licensed mining, but also to recreational prospecting. Simply put, if land is exempted under Section 6, 6A or 7, no one can legally prospect, mine or fossick there, regardless of whether they need a license or not. The law closes any loopholes to ensure such protected lands remain untouched by mining or prospecting activities. Now scroll down a little bit. These are all of the lands that fall under Section 6, but the one that mentions S7 is right here, at the top of page 27 under E. Land that is 1. Under Section 7 exempted from being subject to a license, or 2. By or under any act exempted from exploration or mining or being subject to a license. Again, the license bit is where the confusion arises. The phrase in Section 6E of the Act makes it clear that certain protected lands, like those exempted under Section 7, are completely off limits for any kind of mining, exploration or prospecting. But it's 6F that is more relevant. 6F explicitly includes land exempted by other acts and applies the exemption to 1. Searching for minerals or stone, 2. Extractive industries, and 3. Being subject to an authority under this Act. 6F3 is crucial because it mentions authority under this Act, which encompasses miners' rights and tourist fossicking authorities, not just formal licenses. This makes Section 6F the section that more directly rules out recreational prospecting on exempted land, such as using a pan or metal detector to search for gold. Why? Again, because the tourist fossicking authority or a miner's right fall under other authorities used in the law in this Act. Section 6 explicitly states that lands exempted under Section 7 or other acts cannot be subject to any license or authority. Additionally, Section 55 confirms this by stating that fossicking cannot occur on lands exempted under Section 6, 6A or 7, even if you have a fossicking permit. In simple terms, if the land is exempt, you cannot prospect or fossick there, no exceptions. So because the miners' rights section explicitly states that any land that falls under Section 6, which includes S7 because it's spoken about under 6E, is unavailable to prospecting, this means S7 is a no-go zone. So to summarise, both a miner's right or a tourist fossicking authority can be considered a form of licence or authority under the Mineral Resources Sustainable Development Act of 1990. While they are not called licences in the traditional sense, they are both legal instruments that grant permission to search for minerals, and the Act treats them as equivalent to other forms of authorities. This is why they are listed under other authorities in the Act, as they provide individuals the legal right to fossick or prospect. Now, if you didn't want to go through all this legal mumbo-jumbo, you could just do what I mentioned at the start and go onto the resources.vic.gov website and see the fact that at the bottom, it summarises the rights for those with a miner's right. It clearly states you can't prospect on an area exempted from recreational prospecting or an extractive industry or otherwise exempted under the Mineral Resources Sustainable Development Act of 1990 or any other act, meaning this act restricts these areas to prospectors. So I hope that clarifies things a bit. I'm not happy about these rules, but they're there, unfortunately, and I'm a big believer of the saying knowledge is power.